I'm Makayla. When I was 21, standing in the middle of what used to be our house in South Carolina with my suitcase soaked and the hurricane still howling, I realized a brutal truth. My own flesh and blood family couldn't even pretend to care when everything we owned had been destroyed. And that night, as the rain poured down relentlessly, I watched my brother burst out laughing at me like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life. My mom spit out words sharper than any wind. My sister screamed insults right in my face in front of everyone, and the rest of them turned their backs as if I no longer existed. No one reached out to help. Not my mom, not my dad, not my brother, not my sister. Just cruel, mocking laughter echoing through the wreckage, cold stares, and the sound of them rummaging through the rubble for their own things while I stood there drenched, shivering, invisible. When the storm finally eased, what came wasn't warmth or help. It was deadly silence from the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I remember staring at the devastation while neighbors pulled each other from the mud. Families clung to one another in tears. Strangers carried children to safety, and I was completely alone. In that moment, soaked to the bone, I made a silent vow: if they saw me as nothing when I had nothing, one day they would know exactly what it feels like to lose me forever. I didn't know it then, but that horrific night amid the ruins was only the opening scene of a story that would strip my family of their peace, their pride, and the daughter they had so easily discarded. Stay with me until the end, and I'll show you how the same people who mocked me at my absolute lowest ended up blowing up my phone with frantic, desperate pleas, begging me to come back. Stay with Makayla until the end of this story, okay? I'll tell you every detail how my mom went from spitting venomous words amid the wreckage to sending over 40 messages with tears blurring the entire screen, begging her daughter to come back. The next part is packed with twists and shocking truths being revealed. You absolutely won't want to miss it if you've already subscribed and turned on notifications. Makayla thanks you all from the bottom of my heart. Your support is my biggest motivation. If not, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now, okay? I promise you won't regret it. A few days after the hurricane retreated, my family was crammed into a cheap motel room right off I-95 like shattered debris washed up by the waves into the same forgotten corner of the shore. The room was so cramped it felt suffocating, like an old metal cage. 2 sagging double beds pushed against opposite walls. A rickety wooden table covered in fast food wrappers and cold coffee cups. The bathroom reeked of damp mold mixed with cheap cleaner, burning my throat every time I breathed in. The walls were so thin that the roar of trucks on the highway pierced straight through, making the whole room vibrate with every passing wheel. The glaring red neon vacancy sign outside flickered through the thin curtains, hitting my eyes like a cruel reminder. We were empty, abandoned, and completely lost. No one could sleep. We had just lost our home, lost everything we called stability, yet we had to start over from this rock bottom. My mom Elaine sat cross-legged on the bed, eyes glued to her phone, as if that screen was her real family now. My dad Christopher paced back and forth on the short strip of filthy carpet, restless like a caged animal with no escape. My brother Logan sprawled across the other bed, lounging comfortably as if it were his throne. My sister Riley hunched in the only plastic chair, headphones clamped over her ears, deliberately shutting out the world, and me, I sat quietly on the edge of the lower bunk. My clothes still stiff from the salt water after the storm. Hair unwashed, skin still raw from sun and wind, but in this room I was invisible. That's when the favoritism, the thing that had followed me my whole life, hit clearer and more brutally than ever. Elaine looked up from her phone. Her face only softened when her gaze landed on Logan. "You know, Logan," she said, her voice dropping with pride. "You're the strongest one in this family. You always have been. This family will get through this because of you." Christopher stopped pacing and nodded immediately without a second thought. "That's right. Logan's the pillar. He'll pull us all back up." I was sitting right there, hearing every word. But no one looked at me, as if I didn't exist. The conversation quickly turned to money, the little that remained, and how to invest it for the future. Top priority: new work clothes and leather shoes for Logan. Our son has to look sharp, Elaine declared firmly. He's the only one who can get right back to selling beachfront properties. Clients trust a well-dressed man. That's the fastest way to get steady money coming in. Christopher backed her up without missing a beat. Absolutely right. Logan is the family's hope. Next, a brand new laptop for Riley. Her online classes can't be interrupted, Elaine said, like stating an obvious truth. Education comes first. I waited. My nursing midterms were less than 2 weeks away. School closed, everything shifted online. I needed books, stable Wi-Fi, even just dry clothes to study without shivering from the cold. But my name was never mentioned. Then Elaine brought up the money I sent home every month, the money I earned from those endless graveyard shifts. From mopping hospital floors, changing catheters, holding the hands of strangers on the edge of life and death while my family slept peacefully. The money Makayla sends, she said casually, as if it had never been my sweat or my youth, now needs to be used wisely for our shared future. And right now, only Logan is the one capable of bringing in steady income. No one asked my opinion. No one looked at me. I was erased from the equation while my paycheck was divided up like communal property. The old memories flooded back sharp and merciless. Logan was always number one. New bike, new sneakers. When he turned 16, he got a used but reliable pickup truck. While I biked miles under the Carolina heat or waited for late buses. Logan's grades dropped, private tutors appeared. Wanted to try baseball? Paid coaches were hired. Anything to make our son shine. Riley was the princess. Her entire college paid for in full. No loans, no part-time jobs. Tuition, meal plans, sorority dues, weekend trips, all handed over freely because our little girl deserves to focus on her future. And me, I hunted scholarships alone, filled out every form myself, worked nights and weekends since I was 18. No one asked if I was tired. No one said, "Let us help you." It was never accidental. It was the blueprint of this family. When the GoFundMe money started trickling in, sympathy donations from neighbors, the church strangers, Elaine controlled every cent. She posted tearful thank you posts, but my name never appeared. Logan's new suits were bought, Riley's laptop shipped overnight, and I remained invisible. That night, I lay on the top bunk staring at the water-stained ceiling. The highway noise never stopped. No one asked how I was studying. No one cared that my textbooks were probably floating somewhere in the ocean, but I refused to break. I pulled out my cracked screen phone, the only thing I had left, and studied under the dim light. I would pass. I would graduate. I would build the future they never invested in. And when the day finally came that they needed me, I would already be out of their reach. Months after the hurricane, when the coastal towns in South Carolina finally started clearing debris and rebuilding streets, life in the temporary setup hadn't improved much. I signed up for the remaining nursing courses fully online and picked up every available night shift at the one local hospital that was still half functional. The pay barely covered tuition gaps and basic groceries, but it was mine. No one could touch it without my say. I studied between patients' scribbled notes on break room napkins and pushed through exhaustion because failing wasn't an option. The day arrived for the small associate nursing degree ceremony, a virtual event with a short in-person cap and gown pickup at a rented hall. I dropped the link and time into the family group chat, figuring someone might at least react with an emoji. Nothing. Hours later, a single message from my mom, Elaine, popped up. They were too tied up running insurance paperwork and test driving vehicles for Logan. No questions about how I did, no congrats, nothing. A week after that came my first real job interview for a registered nursing position at a bigger hospital 2 hours inland. I needed the car for one afternoon. I asked Elaine straight if I could borrow it. She shut it down immediately. Riley has an important meeting with her academic advisor. She needs the car more. End of discussion. I ended up taking 2 buses and arrived sweating through my interview outfit, but I still nailed it. Finally, after months of back-and-forth claims and delays, the homeowner's insurance check landed decent money, plus the last chunk from the GoFundMe that had grown bigger than expected, thanks to viral photos of our destroyed street. It should have felt like breathing room for everyone. Instead, Elaine called a family meeting in the cramped rental we had moved into by then. She laid out the plan, clear as day. The bulk of it would go toward a new car for Logan. His real estate sales job along the coast is the priority, she said firmly. That's the fastest way to get stable income flowing back into this household. Clients expect him to show up looking successful. My dad Christopher backed her up without blinking. Riley nodded along, already eyeing upgrades for herself. No one mentioned splitting it fairly. No one asked what I needed for licensing fees, relocation costs, or even scrubs for the new job I had just landed. My name didn't come up once. Then I noticed the withdrawal alert on my banking app, a large chunk gone without warning or explanation. When I confronted Elaine, she waved it off. We needed it to cover the down payment on Logan's car. Family decision. You'll manage, you're good at figuring things out on your own. That was the moment the suffocation hit hardest. It wasn't forgetfulness anymore. They were deliberately cutting me out of every resource meant for recovery, rerouting everything toward Logan and whatever Riley wanted next. The rental felt smaller every day. Arguments over bills grew louder. Elaine complained constantly about how slow everything was moving, how hard it was to get back on track. Yet every new expense still revolved around making Logan look the part, or keeping Riley comfortable. I kept working nights past my finals with top scores, accepted the nursing position that required me to relocate, and started quietly packing what little I owned. The weight of being systematically excluded, of watching money that could have helped everyone get redirected only to prop up the same old favorites, settled in deep. It wasn't just unfair. It was calculated. One late night after another grueling shift, I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the dark, pulled out my phone, and opened a blank notes page. I started typing every single instance of being treated like I didn't count. One late night after another grueling shift, I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the dark, pulled out my phone, and opened a blank notes page. My thumbs hovered for a second, then started moving. I typed fast, like if I stopped, I'd lose the nerve. Birthday cash meant for my first real pair of running shoes, gone to Logan's new gaming console. Middle school talent show where I sang solo, no one showed but the whole family, drove hours for Logan's baseball tournament the same weekend. The part-time diner tips I saved for textbooks quietly transferred for Riley's spring break trip with friends. Every ignored text asking for a ride to clinicals. Every were busy when I needed someone to proofread my nursing application essay. It wasn't petty anymore. It was evidence. A timeline of being treated like background noise in my own life. I read it back once, heart-pounding, then copied the whole thing. Names changed, details blurred, and posted it anonymously on a subreddit for toxic family dynamics after natural disasters. Title simple: family prioritized golden child recovery, while scapegoat got nothing after hurricane. I hit submit expecting crickets, maybe a couple of that sucks comments at best. Instead, notifications started pinging within minutes. Upvotes climbed fast. Comments poured in. This happened to me after Katrina. My parents rebuilt my brother's life first and left me couch surfing. Same after Maria. They used FEMA money on my sister's car while I slept in my office. You're not crazy. This is classic scapegoat treatment. People shared their own lists in replies. Strangers validated every line I'd written. For the first time, the anger I carried didn't feel exaggerated or dramatic, it felt seen. A few days later, emboldened by the response, I propped my phone against a water bottle on the dresser, hit record, and filmed a short TikTok. No face, just my voice over grainy stock footage of hurricane damage and a blurred photo of rubble. I kept it raw the moment the house collapsed. The laughter from my brother, the cold words from my mom, the screaming from my sister, the way they all turned away to salvage only what mattered to them. Caption: When your family laughs while you stand in the ruins of everything. Toxic dynamics after disaster. I posted it without overthinking, then went to sleep. I woke up to hundreds of views. By evening, thousands. It spread quietly at first through South Carolina survivor groups, people who knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything and then lose family support on top of it. Then it jumped to bigger storm survivor communities. Comments exploded. This is my story after Ian. They took my insurance money for my siblings' business too. Finally, someone said it out loud. DMs flooded in. Not hate or trolling, real questions. How did you start separating finances? What did you do for housing when no one helped? How do you handle the guilt when you go no contact? I answered as many as I could honestly. Told them how I opened a separate bank account, how I picked up extra shifts, how I stopped explaining myself. Every reply I sent felt like paying forward the validation I'd just received. The more I shared, the lighter the weight became. These strangers didn't know my name, didn't owe me anything yet. They showed up in ways my own blood never had. They got angry for me. They celebrated small wins with me. They reminded me I wasn't the problem. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, not as the inconvenience, not as the backup plan, but as someone whose pain was valid and whose strength was real. A few weeks later, I found a cheap studio apartment a few blocks away and decided to sign the lease on my own. The place was tiny, one room, with a kitchenette, peeling paint, and a window that overlooked a parking lot, but it was mine. No shared walls with arguments, no waiting for someone else to approve my space. I paid the deposit from my latest paycheck and moved in with 2 duffels and a borrowed air mattress. First thing I did was cut every financial tie still linking me back. I stopped the monthly transfers that had been going out automatically for years. Then I called the phone carrier and removed myself from the family plan, entirely setting up my own account with a basic prepaid option. No more subsidizing unlimited data for everyone else while I scraped by on Wi-Fi hotspots. The bills hit harder at first. Rent, utilities, groceries, all on me now. I doubled down on night shifts at the hospital, volunteering for every overtime slot available. 12-hour stretches turned into 16 whenever possible. My body ached constantly, eyes burned from lack of sleep, but the extra money stacked up quick. It went straight to essentials: a used bed frame, basic cookware, a small desk for studying what was left of my coursework. Meanwhile, the TikTok channel grew steadily. I kept it real, no fancy editing, just me talking to the camera in scrubs after shifts, or sitting on my bare floor with a notebook. Videos about creating a zero-based budget when you're starting from nothing after a disaster. How to hunt for entry-level nursing jobs without a permanent address. Step by step on opening solo bank accounts and credit cards to build independence. The hardest ones, recognizing financial exploitation in family dynamics and building the courage to set hard boundaries. Views climbed from thousands to tens of thousands. Comments shifted from sympathy to action, people sharing screenshots of their own new accounts, thanking me for templates I posted in captions. Brands started sliding into DMs with small sponsorship offers, affordable scrubs companies, budgeting apps. I turned most down until one aligned perfectly, a basic finance tool for low-income workers. The first paid collab covered 2 months' rent. Through it all, one person checked in consistently without agenda. Aunt Joanne, my aunt, who lived a few blocks over in the same neighborhood we'd grown up in, was the only family member who ever messaged just to ask how I was really doing. She'd text simple things: "Saw your new video. Proud of you for speaking up." Or, "Need anything for the apartment? I have extra plates." After I moved, she offered to help haul boxes even though there weren't many. We met for coffee once neutral ground, and she listened without defending anyone else. No guilt trips, no, but they're your parents. Just quiet support. She became the only thread I didn't sever. Her messages felt safe, like proof that not every blood tie had to hurt. The independence tasted better every day. Grocery runs on my schedule. Laundry when I wanted. Nights off rare, but when they came, I spent them planning content, or finally sleeping without highway noise or family tension leaking through walls. The channel wasn't huge yet, but it was growing because it helped people, and strangely helping them healed me too. Money worries eased as paychecks stabilized and side income trickled in. I bought a real mattress, hung thrift store curtains, stocked a pantry with food I chose. Small wins, but they stacked into something solid. Aunt Joanne became my benchmark. If a relationship didn't feel at least this respectful, it didn't belong in my new life. One day, Aunt Joanne messaged me about how things were really starting to fall apart back home. She didn't dramatize it, just laid out the facts in her straightforward way. Logan had been laid off from his real estate sales job. The coastal market froze solid after the hurricane. Buyers vanished, listings sat empty for months. Commissions dried up completely. He tried pivoting to inland properties, but without the flashy beachfront deals he was known for, clients stopped calling. Unemployment checks helped a little, but they ran out faster than expected. Riley dropped out midway through the semester. Tuition bills piled up with late fees, and there wasn't enough left after essentials to cover the next payment. She took a full-time waitress gig at a chain restaurant near the highway, pulling double shifts on weekends for tips. Aunt Joanne said Riley came home exhausted, barely speaking, her old confidence gone. My mom Elaine and my dad Christopher fought more openly now. Arguments echoed through their small rental over maxed-out credit cards. Overdue notices, the slow trickle from remaining insurance adjustments that never seemed to arrive on time. Without the monthly buffer I'd once provided, every unexpected expense hit like a punch. Utilities got shut off once for a week. They had to borrow from neighbors to get them turned back on. Aunt Joanne heard it all secondhand, but saw enough during quick visits. The tension thickened the air. Meals turned silent or explosive. Logan blamed the economy, then Riley for not trying harder at school. Riley snapped back at him for wasting opportunities. Elaine complained bitterly about how nothing was going according to plan anymore, how hard it was to keep everyone afloat. Christopher withdrew more, spending hours scrolling job sites without results. Word started spreading in the tight local circles. Some of my anonymous posts had circulated beyond online groups, screenshots shared in neighborhood chats, whispered about at church potlucks. Old acquaintances messaged Aunt Joanne, "Is that story about the family after the storm yours sounds familiar?" Or heard something about favoritism and recovery money? Everything okay? She never confirmed or denied, just changed the subject, but the side eyes and quiet gossip grew. The rental house turned into a pressure cooker. Blame shifted daily. Logan accused Riley of spending too much on unnecessary things before dropping out. Riley fired back that his fancy suits and networking events drained more. Elaine lashed out at both for not stepping up faster, then turned on Christopher for not finding side work. Christopher retreated further, muttering about bad luck and timing. Aunt Joanne described visits feeling heavier each time. No one laughed anymore. Conversations stayed surface level or devolved quick. Meals stretched out in awkward silence, broken only by sighs or sharp comments. The golden child shine had worn off. Reality settled in without the safety nets they'd counted on. I read her updates without replying much. No satisfaction, no pity, just quiet confirmation that choices have echoes. They'd built their recovery around propping up the same patterns, and now those patterns couldn't hold the weight. The distance I'd created wasn't punishment, it was protection. And it let me watch from afar as the consequences played out naturally without my involvement pulling them out of it. Time flew by, and before I knew it, I received my official nursing certification and moved to a different city. Charleston felt like a fresh start, bigger hospital, better pay shifts that actually ended on time sometimes. I rented a one-bedroom apartment downtown close enough to walk to work on good days. The salary covered rent, utilities, and even allowed small treats like eating out without guilt or saving for future courses. No more scraping bottom, no more wondering if the next bill would break me. I signed up for the volunteer disaster response team through the hospital. Every time a new hurricane threatened the East Coast, I joined the crews heading out, stocking shelters, providing basic medical checks, distributing supplies. It gave purpose beyond the daily grind, turning what I'd survived into something useful for others. Life settled into a rhythm I controlled completely. Stable income, real weekends off, colleagues who became friends. The kind of normal I'd never had growing up. Then, one ordinary morning, my phone started blowing up. Messages and emails flooded in from numbers I'd long muted. My mom, Elaine, led the charge, long paragraphs about how tight things were, how they needed help with credit card debt that had snowballed, how a little loan could get them a down payment on a new place. "We're family, Makayla. We have to stick together in hard times." My dad, Christopher, followed with shorter notes echoing the same plea: money to cover overdue balances, promises it would be paid back once things turned around. Logan chimed in, next texts blaming bad luck in the job market, asking for a boost to tide him over until the next big sale. Riley sent voice notes, voice cracking, talking about how exhausted she was and how a fresh start would change everything. They mixed in admissions. "We know we made mistakes back then. Things got out of hand after the storm." But those lines quickly twisted into blame. "You've done well for yourself. Don't you think it's time to help the people who raised you? Holding grudges this long isn't healthy." "You're being cold, Makayla. Blood is thicker than water." I read them all without responding at first. The shift from vague regret to outright accusation felt familiar, like the same pattern replayed with higher stakes. Aunt Joanne messaged separately that evening, no pressure attached. She filled in the gaps. They were crammed into a cramped two-bedroom rental, now bills stacking faster than they could pay. Logan's unemployment stretched long-term. Odd jobs came and went, nothing steady. Riley waited tables nonstop, coming home drained with barely enough in tips to contribute meaningfully. Spirits hit rock bottom, quiet resentment filling rooms, outbursts over small things, everyone walking on eggshells. She never asked me to fix anything. She just shared what she saw during her rare visits, her voice as neutral as always. That contrast hit me like a knife to the heart. While I built stability step by step, nursing certification earned through lonely nights, apartment paid with my own paychecks, volunteer work I chose freely, they kept circling the same drain, waiting for a rescue that never came because their old crutches were gone. The pleas dragged on for days, promises of change laced with guilt. "We can be better if you give us this one chance. Think about what your grandparents would say. You're the only one who can help." I let them pile up unread for a while, focusing on my shifts, my routines, the life that finally felt safe. The requests grew more desperate, specific amounts for specific debts, repayment timelines that sounded laughably optimistic. Aunt Joanne's updates remained purely factual, louder arguments, scarce sleep, fading hope. I stayed silent toward them, savoring the irony. The family that once diverted every resource away from me now reached out like I was their lifeline. Right after my mom Elaine's final pleading message, I sat frozen on the small sofa in my apartment phone screen, still glowing with her last words. "Makayla, you are our daughter. The family is truly struggling. Just help us this one time and we can start over." I read it several times, not out of hesitation, but to confirm I felt absolutely nothing anymore. No anger exploding, no ache in my chest, not even a flicker of pity. Just a clean, unfamiliar emptiness that felt like peace. I typed a short reply: "I can't help. Don't contact me again." Then I blocked her number. Next came my dad Christopher's, Logan's, Riley's. No long explanations. No accusations, no doors left ajar. I severed every connection completely permanently without a single second of regret. That night, lying in bed with city sounds drifting through the window, I thought about the 3 years that led here. From standing soaked in the wreckage of our South Carolina house suitcase in hand, hearing my brother's mocking laughter, my mom's icy sarcasm, my sister's screamed insults, and no one caring whether I was hurt or even alive. I walked away that day with just a few $100s from night shifts and a bag of wet clothes. But that brutal isolation shoved me onto the path of independence faster than any advice ever could. I doubled my night shifts, finished my final nursing courses early, passed my registered nurse certification on the first try. I moved to Charleston, a bigger city with real opportunities, and most importantly, distance from those toxic old memories. This apartment is entirely mine, deposits saved from my own earnings, furniture pieced together from thrift stores, not a single cent borrowed from family. Every month, part of my salary automatically goes into an emergency fund, something I never dared dream of before, because any extra was always siphoned off for the family. Now I have my own health insurance, a reliable used car, and a life where no one dictates how I spend what I earn. I still volunteer with disaster response teams whenever a new hurricane threatens the coast, driving supply trucks, providing first aid in shelters, teaching young people how to budget when they've lost everything overnight. That work gives me purpose beyond hospital walls and reminds me what real kindness looks like, given freely, no strings attached, not demanded as blood obligation. Aunt Joanne is the only relative I still keep in touch with. She messages regularly, short, no pressure, no defending anyone. Occasionally, she updates me on the other side, Logan jumping between short-term delivery gigs with shaky income, Riley waitressing full-time, no plans to return to school. My parents crammed into a tiny rental credit card debt, ballooning, delayed insurance forcing high-interest loans. She never asks me to intervene, just reports like an observer. I reply politely and move on. I don't wish endless suffering on them. I simply no longer carry the responsibility to fix consequences they created themselves. They chose to mock me when I had nothing, chose to funnel every recovery resource toward Logan, and Riley chose to see me as a financial backup instead of a daughter. Now they live with those choices not destroyed, but far from the comfortable life they once expected. For the first time, I have a real home, not the physical house the storm took, but the life I built brick by brick, relying on no one else. The biggest lesson isn't revenge or satisfaction. It's simpler. Real family shows up when everything collapses, when you have nothing left to offer except yourself. Not people who laugh, mock, insult, and isolate you in the ruins just because you no longer serve their needs. Independence isn't easy, but it brings a freedom no toxic relationship can match. And I choose that freedom every single day without ever looking back.